I'd like to welcome you to ethics class. My name is Tom Eng, and I've been teaching here at Seneca for about 30 years. And specifically, I've been teaching ethics for about 27 of those years. Now, this course is primarily a course about business ethics. So we're going to look at the different issues in business. And because it's a hybrid class, we're not going to meet every single week. In fact, we're just going to meet the first 4 weeks. Let me just get my pointer here. Give me a sec. The first 4 weeks, let me get my pointer. All right. Weeks 1 to 4. So we're going to meet the first 4 weeks. Then we're going to meet on week 6. Okay. So those are 5 classes that we're going to meet before study week in person. And for each of those classes, I'm going to give you 1% for showing up. So that's why we have here in the course requirements, participation in in-person class. We have some in-person class activities. That's 5 classes. That's the 5 classes before study week. Times 1% gives you 5%. Okay? Now, after study week, we have in-person debates. The debate presentations, the requirements are posted under assignments and debate presentation on Blackboard. And you only have to do 1 debate, all right? And you can sign up to determine which week you want to make your presentation. So those will be weeks 8, 9, and 10. So you will only make a presentation on 1 of those weeks. The other 2 weeks, if you come to class, I will give you credit for just being part of the audience and participating in the discussion. We have discussion about the debate topic after each debate to have some interaction. And then you'll get another 2% on the days you don't present, but you come to class to listen to other students debate. So essentially, in terms of in-person requirements, then you get 1% for 5 classes before study break and 2% for audience participation on 2 classes that you don't debate. And you also get 13%. That's your actual debate, where you participate in a group in a debate. For details, look at the debate requirements posted in Blackboard. If you've got any questions about that, just let me know. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to break up into teams, and you're going to have a yes side and a no side. So you've got 4 people in a team. 2 people argue for the yes side, 2 people argue for the no side. So for example, climate change. 2 people may argue that climate change is caused by humans. That's the yes side. Yes, climate change is caused by humans. The other 2 will argue, no, climate change is not caused by humans. It's natural. Okay, so that's basically, you go back and forth on that debate. So that's worth 13%. The rest of the requirements will be quizzes on the chapters. Now, there's 10 chapters. You're not required to get the book. I will post the PowerPoint slides for each chapter. It's based on a textbook. I wrote these PowerPoint slides for the publisher. And so these are my PowerPoint slides. Other schools actually use my PowerPoint slides. And these are all you need. You don't have to buy the book. So each PowerPoint slide for each chapter, 10 chapter PowerPoint slides, 5% each for each quiz, all done online for a total of 50%. Okay. Now, I'll tell you a secret here. The quizzes are not difficult. Okay. Some are, I'll tell you, it's primarily true and false, and maybe a little bit multiple choice. Okay, so it's really not hard. Okay, so these are the chapter quizzes that you will do starting in I believe week 3 or so. You'll be doing almost 1 per week approximately. Now the case quizzes, these are separate. What I have you do is I have you study a case either on PowerPoint or on video or on both. There's 3 cases, like one's on Enron, and then there's 2 other cases. And you study the case in advance. It's posted on Blackboard under case quizzes. And then on the 3 days or so before the due date, I will post a quiz. And then you do the quiz. All right. So that's what we call case quizzes. So it's basically a quiz on the case. You just have to think about the case, look through the PowerPoint slides, and you'll just do fine. So that's 3 times 5%, and it's another 15%. And then we have 6 assignments. These are simple, short assignments. They are posted on Blackboard. You can do them early. They're all posted already. All the 6 assignments are already posted. You can submit them early if you'd like. It'd be great if you did. And they're worth 2.5% each, and that's for a total of 15%. So really, that's pretty much the course. That's 100% here. And it's not a difficult course. I try to make things easy for you. But I just really want you to get to know some of the ethical issues in business. Okay, so let me just give you an introduction to ethics. Let me go to our next slide. So first of all, let's define what ethics is. What is ethics? And I think all of you already know what it is. You've already heard about ethics in other courses, right? Ethics is about right and wrong, study of moral principles, values, okay? Right or wrong, good or bad, okay? And you've studied ethics in, I'm sure, accounting, in introduction to business, in various other marketing, various other courses in ethics. They've had sections in ethics. But we're specifically talking about ethics in this class, and we're going to give a preview of all the ethical issues, or primarily many of the ethical issues in business. Now, ethics actually was added recently, relatively recently, to business programs due to a change in public expectations. Now, what I mean is, think about my situation. All right, I've been teaching here at Seneca, I told you, almost 30 years. And we started teaching at ethics maybe about 27 years ago. All right. So ethics was added to business programs about 27, 30 years ago. Okay. Just when we started offering here at Seneca, and also other schools added them to MBA programs. Now, I studied business. My first degree, I have quite a few degrees, but my first degree is a bachelor's degree in business from a school called the University of Illinois in Chicago. I was born in Chicago. I'm Chinese. I'm what you call an American-born Chinese, an ABC. Okay, that's me, an American-born Chinese. So I'm Chinese, but I was born in Chicago, and I studied in Chicago, and I got my first bachelor's degree in business at the University of Illinois in Chicago. Now, I'm a pretty old guy. All right. I'll tell you. I'll tell you a secret. I'll tell you the year that I started in my first year of university. Okay, I'm sure it's long before you were born. It was 1973. 1973. Okay, 1973 is when I started my bachelor's degree in business, and I graduated in 1977, 4 years later, with a bachelor's degree in business. So that makes me a pretty old guy. Now, mind you, when I started my degree in business, I was pretty young. I was only 17 years old, but that's a long time ago. All right, we're talking a long time ago when I studied business. Something like 50 years ago. Okay, and now I tell you this because when I studied business some 50 years ago, we studied a lot of the same subjects as you did. We studied accounting. I studied accounting. We had the same debit and credit system. I studied marketing. We still studied the 4 P's of marketing. We studied business. We studied management. So we studied many of the same courses that you're taking now here at Seneca. But there was one course that we never had anything about, and that was ethics. Not a single thing about ethics. Today, as I say, I know you've had ethics in other courses, in your other business courses. They all talk about ethics. But in my time, there was nothing about ethics. Ethics was not in business. If you wanted to study ethics in university, you had to study philosophy, okay, or maybe religion, okay, right or wrong, right? But not in business. So ethics was added relatively recently, as I say, about 30 years ago or 27 years ago when we added to Seneca to business programs due to a change in public expectations. Now, what changed public expectations? I have here uh, a picture of the Ford Pinto back in the 1980s. I remember this car because, as I say, I was a university student and I was driving in the 70s, and the Ford Pinto was a very popular car at that time. And you may have heard of this case. You might say it was the first ethics case that started public expectations to change. The Ford Pinto was a popular car, but it had a design flaw. In the back of the car, in the gas tank, was positioned in such a way that when the car was rear-ended, let's say your car was at a stop signal, and another car came up behind, didn't stop on time, and boom, it hit you, not super hard, but hard enough to bump you, and it would rupture the gas tank, and it would spew the gasoline into the passenger compartment of the car, and a spark from the collision would ignite the gasoline and burn everyone inside the car. Horribly, people died because of this design flaw. Now, the engineers at Ford Pinto, they figured out that they could solve the problem in different ways, but one of the easiest ways to solve the problem was to install a rubber lining around the gas tank for approximately $11 per car. And so they went to the CEO of Ford at the time, a fellow by the name of Lee Iacocca, who's a very famous CEO. They made a movie about him. And they went to Mr. Iacocca and they said, "Sir, we can fix this problem for about $11 per car. So shall we go ahead and fix it?" Okay. And Lee Iacocca said, "No, don't fix it. People don't care about safe cars. They just want cheap cars." Okay. Now it sounds silly, but back in the 70s, safety wasn't a big thing at that time. And Lee Iacocca said, well, all they care about was cheap cars. So Ford executives, they met and they had what they called this cost benefit analysis. They estimated, okay, a certain number of people will die from this collision, and maybe about 180 deaths per year. And we may get sued by the families in court, and we may have to pay out damages, okay? And that's going to cost us some money, all right? But on the other hand, if we fix the car, and they sold millions of cars for $11 per car, that's going to cost us maybe even more money. So they did this cost benefit analysis, and what they finally decided was Ford executives could have fixed the problem for $11 per car, but it was cheaper just to let their customers burn. Isn't that crazy? But that's exactly what happened. See, they estimated there would be 180 deaths per year, and at $11 per car, that's $137 million a year to fix the problem and they estimated about 49.5 million to do nothing and get sued by the families. And it was perfectly legal because crash tests were not required by the US government until 1977. That's the year I graduated with my bachelor's degree in business. And I kind of remembered this, because I was driving when I was in university, and they showed these crash tests on TV and how Ford executives knew about this problem where that cars would burst into flames, and yet executives did nothing. And so people were outraged. They said, how could Ford do this? Knowingly allow people to die just because they wanted to save some money. And, Ford was the first U.S. company that was sued for homicide. Homicide is murder. So the first company that was sued for murder because executives knowingly knew that people would die, but they did nothing. But that was the mentality back in the 70s. So this is what kind of started people to think maybe executives, companies need to do better. Maybe they need to start caring about human life. Maybe they need to start caring about society. Maybe they need to start caring about the environment. And by the way, in the 70s, we knew nothing about global warming, but later we discovered, scientists told us that humans are warming up the earth. So again, this the scandal started it, like Ford Pinto. And some of you may have heard of the Enron scandal back in the early 2000. Enron was the seventh largest U.S. corporation in the world at that time. It was bigger than Sony, bigger than IBM. And Enron, they had, it was an energy company, and they had this new way of doing energy, so to speak. And their stock skyrocketed to 90 some dollars. But then they discovered there was a accounting scandal, and it just basically shot back down to zero. And the top executives, like the founder and CEO Ken Lay here, he was sentenced to 165 years in prison. He died of a heart attack before he went to prison. Some said he got what he deserved. And the co-CEO Jeffrey Skilling went to prison. The CFO, the chief financial officer, Andy Fastow, went to prison. So because of accounting scandal, people started thinking, corporations can't do this. They can't mislead the public and get away with, just making executives and making themselves rich. So again, public expectations began to change. So that's why we've added ethics into the business curriculum, because we want to teach ethics to help us to make better decisions, good decisions. And ultimately, these decisions will determine the course of your life and your professional success. Some of you might want to become professionals, okay? A professional. And I want to ask you here, why is ethical behavior important in your professional career? Some of you may say, well, I want to become a CPA, right? A professional accountant. Some of you may want to become a financial services professional, okay? Some of you say, well, I want to become a human resources professional. Some of you say, well, I just want to be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur actually is a kind of a professional, and also they should have good business ethics. The question, though, for professionals, it's important to have professional standards. And every profession, whether you're an accountant or whether you're a doctor or a dentist or an engineer, these are all professionals, they all follow a code of ethics. And because ethical behavior is so important for professionals. Now, why is that? Well, I ask you this question. Who would you trust more? Your doctor, who's a professional, or this guy, a used car salesman, right? And I know all of you would say, I trust my doctor more. And why is that? Because you feel a doctor is part of a respected profession. You trust the doctor. But a used car salesman, well, he's not a professional. He just wants to get my money. and they're known to be untrustworthy, liars and cheats, right? So professional behavior is more important for a professional because we need to protect the reputation of the profession. When we talk about professional ethics, we speak of a professional in a strict sense. Now, we can speak of professionals generally, but if we talk about a professional in a strict sense, we say professionals have specialized skills and training. And in a very strict sense, they have to be licensed or certified to practice their profession by a professional association. And ethical behavior is more important for a professional because professionals provide important services to the public, like medical doctors, like financial services professionals, like accountants, like engineers who build bridges and build buildings. And it's very important that they must be trusted because a professional has what we call a fiduciary relationship with his or her client. A fiduciary relationship means a relationship of trust. So, for example, my doctor says to me, Mr. Eng, I think I need to give you a heart operation. It's very critical to have this heart operation because if you don't get this operation, your health could be affected. And not only that, you're at high risk for a heart attack and you could die anytime from a heart attack. Now, my doctor says that to me. I don't know a whole lot about medicine. I don't know about my heart. But I have to trust in the professional expertise of my doctor. And so my doctor says I need a heart operation. I will likely get it because I trust him. And I trust that he's giving me this heart operation, not because he wants money, but because it's for my own good. Now, I can't say that for a used car salesman, right? Because a used car salesman is only out for my money. So again, uh, professional behavior, ethical behavior is important for professionals. What are the most trusted professionals in Canada? Think about some of these professions here. Well, nurses actually are number one in a recent survey. Most trusted professionals in Canada. In the survey, 92% said they would trust nurses. And of course, they were the heroes of the COVID pandemic. They work long hours and they work under harsh conditions to take care of patients during the COVID pandemic. Close behind, doctors. 89% trust doctors. And we trust our doctor, right? If my doctor says I need a heart operation, I trust him, okay, or her. 89% trust scientists. That's pretty good. And I think that one reason why we had a high vaccination rate is because, people trusted the scientists who created the vaccines, that they created a safe and effective vaccine. What's the next profession you think is trusted? Teachers. 85% trust teachers, which is pretty darn good. We trust the teachers to teach our children. 81% trust accountants. Now, that's pretty good. Now, during the Enron scandal, that number shot way down. Very few people trusted accountants after Enron, but slowly over the last 20 years, they built back up their profession. And so now 81% trust accountants. It's very important to trust accountants. Next profession we can think about, 81% trust our dentists. That's pretty good too. Journalists, not so much, only 62%. We don't always trust what the reporters say, even on the news. Only 50% trust lawyers. And I find this kind of interesting because, lawyers, I think, they're in a very respectable profession. But for some reason, at least in North America, lawyers aren't very well trusted. And I think part of the reason may be due to media. When we look at dramas and TV shows about lawyers, they're always portrayed as self-serving, greedy, sleazy kind of guys. So maybe that's why that has affected people's image of lawyers. 47% trust business executives. So not everyone trusts an executive, like, Enron executives, Elon Musk. A lot of people don't trust him. This is no surprise here. 28% trust the car salesperson, even less trust the used car salesperson, but even a car salesperson in general, we don't trust. But there's one profession that we trust even less. Can you guess what it is? If you guess politician, you're correct. We don't trust politicians because they say anything to get elected, right? So these are what we call, professionals are important to be trusted if you belong to a professional organization. So of course, car salespeople, they're not strictly professionals, but I throw that in because, these are jobs that, respected or trusted jobs. And we don't trust necessarily car salespeople, but we do trust doctors because they're professionals and they follow a code of ethics. And if we look at all the codes of ethics of every profession, they have commonalities. For example, for a doctor, it's important that they're honest. Honesty is in every professional ethics. That's the medical code of ethics. Here is a excerpt from the financial planner's code of ethics. And here it says, you put the client's interests ahead of your own. Okay. Now, what does that mean? It means, for example, a financial planner sells financial products like mutual funds and other financial products. And they make money by getting commissions from the financial products. Now, ethically, not all financial planners do this, but what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to sell you the product that is good for you, for your best interests, okay? That's good for your financial situation, not necessarily the product that pays the most commission, because some products give them more money, right? So a good professional will seek your interest first, not their own self-interest. So they're going to say, I'll sell you the product that's good for you, not necessarily that's going to pay me the most commission. Okay. So that's why we say not exploit the client for personal advantage. Okay. Here is marketing. And of course, marketing, we want to have honest marketing and, avoid false and misleading advertising, and we don't want to have high pressure tactics in marketing. Human resources. Human resources also have similar codes of ethics, and in human resources, they really emphasize fairness and equity. You know, when you hire someone, you need to hire someone fairly and objectively, and you need to treat employees with fairness. So again, these are professional ethics, which are common. There's commonalities in every code of ethics. In the CPA, we emphasize for professional accountants the public interest. And we emphasize the public interest because it's important for the public to trust accountants. Think about this. If the public does not trust accountants, the stock market would collapse, just like Enron stock collapse. When the Enron accountant was discovered to have misled the public by cooking the books, the stock went to zero. And if we suddenly stop trusting accountants, well, we can't trust financial statements and the stock market would collapse. So the public interest is so important for accountants. Now, this code of ethics here, the excerpt says, normally acting in the public interest is achieved by acting in the interest of one's client or employer. So what that means is normally when we act in the public interest, we serve the employer, the interest of the employer, and that acts in the public interest. But sometimes the interests of the employer, like at Enron, conflict with the public interest, because when the CEO of Enron told Andy Fastow, the accountant, to mislead the public with cooking the books, that was a conflict. And so it says when there's a conflict between these interests, if your employer tells you to do something that is against the public, not trusting accountants, well, the professional's first obligation is to the public at large. And that means the accountant at Enron, the CFO, Andy Fastow, you'll do a little case on him later, but he was supposed to say, no, I can't do what you ask me to do, Mr. CEO, because that will betray the public interest. But he didn't do it, and he did mislead the public, and ultimately he went to jail for it. So that's why they say acting appropriately in such situations may require the courage of one's convictions, because you could get fired from your job because if you don't do what your boss wants you to do. Okay, but again, that's what we say in ethics. Professionals need to commit to their code of ethics and to protect the public interest. So here are all the obligations of professionals in all the codes we looked at. The commonalities were honesty. You have to have due care and diligence. We want loyalty, means you act in the client's best interest, not your own self-interest, not what's going to make me money. You want to have confidentiality. You want to have competence. And again, it's not always easy. As I say, to act in the client's best interest is not always an easy thing to do, because you could lose your job. And I still remember my my auto mechanic. I had an auto mechanic, and the auto mechanic told me, I went to the dealership, and the mechanic says, Mr. Ang, we need to fix your air conditioner. I said, well, why? And he says, well, this is wrong, and he was giving me some BS. All right, and I didn't trust him. Okay, I didn't trust the mechanic. Because I was thinking, he just wants to make money because he's acting in self-interest, not my best interest, right? And so I said, no, don't do anything. So I took my car back. And then I went to my friend and I asked my friend to recommend me to his mechanic because I knew my friend had a trustworthy mechanic. And so I went to my friend's mechanic and I asked him to check my air conditioner. And my friend's mechanic came back to me and he said, Tom, there's nothing wrong with your air conditioning. I checked it 3 times and it's freezing cold. I said, well, what about the mechanic at the dealership who said I needed to fix it for $1,200? He says, well, he just wants your money. And the mechanic who told me there was nothing wrong with my air conditioner, he's had my business for the last 30 years because now I trust him. So what we're saying in ethics, long term, when you act in the client's best interests, when you're honest, long term you get business. Okay, and long term you're trusted. Okay, so it's important for professionals to be trusted. Okay. I like the story of a patient who says to the doctor, "Doctor, I'm very nervous. This is my first operation, but I trust your competence, but I'm still very nervous," because professionals are supposed to be competent, right? And the doctor says, "Well, I know just how you feel. This is my first time too." Now, we need to trust in the competence of doctors because professionals have competence. But someone may say, well, doesn't every doctor have their first time? I say, don't worry. If it's a doctor's first time, he's not going to tell you it's the first time, but he's going to have his supervisor standing next to him. And the supervisor, of course, has had thousands of operations under his belt. So again, competence is one of the professional obligation. They have to do a competent job. And even if it's their first time, they've got the supervisor to supervise you. If you don't like the idea of a student doctor working on you, don't go to a teaching hospital. For example, Toronto General in downtown Toronto is a teaching hospital, and most of the operations done there are done by student doctors. Now, if you don't like that, then go to a different hospital, because again, teaching hospitals, you've got medical students doing the work. But again, we trust professionals, and I think still it's okay to have a student doctor as long as his professional supervisor is standing next to him. So we talk about success, and we talk about, again, long-term success, and we talk about achieving success in the right way. I mean, sure, you can break the rules, you can get rich by cheating and even successful by cheating. Yes, you can do that. But in ethics, we say we want to achieve success in the right way by following ethical principles, by being honest, because in the long term, we believe this will be the right thing to do. And ultimately, long term, it's going to benefit us. Some people say, well, what about guys like Donald Trump? Now you can love or hate this guy. We're not being political here. And in this quote here, he says that he's honest, right? But he says, he doesn't take shortcuts and doesn't break the law. But a lot of people say, well, he's got a reputation for being a liar. Okay. A lot of people don't trust what he says. And so some people say, well, what about Donald Trump? He's wildly successful, and yet he lies to his teeth. What about him? Well, I say, absolutely. You can be successful by being a liar. You can be successful by cheating and doing the wrong thing. Yeah, sure, you can be successful. You can be successful that way, but we want to do it the right way. And a better example, I think, is Warren Buffett. He's one of the 10 richest people in the world. And this guy, he's now in his 90s and he still goes to work. And he's known for his ethics. And I like what he says here. He says, honesty is a terrific policy. What do you look back in terms of whether you have been a success? He said, what's real success? You have certain things you want to achieve, but if you don't have the love and respect of people, you're always a failure. So in other words, he says, you want to be a decent human being. You want others to respect you, that you want your loved ones to love you because they know you're an honest and decent human being. If you have a reputation for lying and cheating, even if you have lots of money, who cares? You're still a failure. So I like what he says. And so in this class, we're going to emphasize, being successful in the right way, being an ethical and decent person.